If you were glued to the Murdoch trial like I was, then buckle up, because we have barely scratched the surface of the drama surrounding this family.
My name is Alex Richard Alexander Murdoch.
You mean like, did I shoot my wife and my son?
Yes.
No.
Alex Murdaugh has been indicted yet again for tax evasion. These latest charges are on top of roughly 100 others that he was already facing for various financial crimes. But all of that pales in comparison to the dead bodies that just seem to be piling up around the Murdochs. And I'm not just talking about Maggie and Paul. Now, if you followed the case against Alex Murdaugh, you're no doubt familiar with the names Stephen Smith, Gloria Satterfield, and Mallory Beach. Mallory Beach died in 2019 as a result of a boating accident. And despite what the Murdoch family wants the public to believe, there doesn't seem to be a question as to who was responsible for Mallory's tragic death. According to law enforcement, Paul Murdoch was the one driving the boat and heavily intoxicated at the time. Now, he was charged with 3 felonies in connection with that accident, but never faced those charges in court because, of course, he was murdered by his father before trial. Justice for Mallory Beach will sadly never happen, but there are currently 2 open police investigations in South Carolina that have a direct connection to the Murdoch family. 19-year-old Stephen Smith was found dead in the middle of a rural South Carolina road in July of 2015. Smith, who was going to school for nursing, had been driving back from class in his beat-up, bright yellow car on a hot summer night when it seemingly ran out of gas. Now, his body would later be found 3 miles from where he left his car. His death ruled a hit and run. The problem with this was that nothing about the scene looked like a hit and run, aside from, of course, a person just laying in the street. Now, the coroner ruled that Stephen died from blunt force trauma to his head, possibly from being struck in the head by the side view mirror of the truck. But the thing is, there was no broken glass from the mirror in the street. Stephen's only injury was to his head. In fact, investigators on the scene initially thought he may have been shot because he wasn't hurt anywhere else. So I just want you to kind of picture this. If you're hit in the head by a moving truck, you are bound to just go flying, and that's gonna leave marks. I mean, I tripped on the sidewalk this week, just tripped, and managed to scrape both my knees, my nose, and my hand. But somehow, despite the ME saying Stephen Smith was hit by a car, he didn't have any of those trademark scrapes or scratches or road rash that you would get from sliding down the asphalt. Now, his mom told Bluffton Today that Stephen, who was gay, may have had a man stalking him. And Stephen's mom is convinced that someone he knew recognized his car and killed him on purpose. She also claims that Stephen had a fling with a boy from school, but that has not been verified. From the get-go, chatter started circulating that one of the Murdoch boys could have had something to do with it, and fingers were pointing at Buster Murdoch. Now, Buster was never actually connected to this tragedy in any way more substantial than just chatter. But after his mom and brother were killed, there was renewed scrutiny on the entire family from both the public and from law enforcement. And it was actually Paul and Maggie Murdoch's deaths that prompted the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, otherwise known as SLED, to take another look at the death of Stephen Smith. And a SLED spokesperson revealed that they changed their mind about the hit and run and are now investigating Stephen's death as a homicide, quote, based on information gathered during the course of the double murder investigation. Well, that was all they had to say. The fact that investigating the Paul and Maggie Murdoch homicide led to questions about Stephen, well, it just did not take the public long to go after Buster. And after weeks of seemingly endless harassment, Buster finally released a statement. I have tried my best to ignore the vicious rumors about my involvement in Stephen Smith's tragic death that continue to be published in the media as I grieve over the brutal murders of my mother and brother. I love them so much and miss them terribly. Now, last month, Stephen Smith's body was exhumed and re-examined, but the results of that have not yet been released. At this time, not Buster nor anyone from the Murdoch family have been named as a suspect or person of interest in this case. A $35,000 reward is being offered by the Smith family for any information that leads to the arrest and conviction of those responsible for his death. Maggie and Paul Murdoch were not the first people whose lives would come to an end on Moselle. It was in 2018 when the family's housekeeper, Gloria Satterfield, accidentally tripped and fell to her death on the family's property. Gloria had worked for the Murdochs for 2 decades, and people who knew them have said she all but raised their youngest child, Paul. On February 2nd in 2018, Maggie Murdoch, wife of Alec, mother of Buster and Paul, called 911 to report that their housekeeper had fallen, her head was bleeding, and she couldn't get her up. Now, Maggie tells dispatch that Gloria tripped on the brick steps outside of their home, Moselle. Yes, that is the same Moselle where Maggie and Paul would later be shot to death by Alec, but that is another conversation.
My housekeeper has fallen and her head is bleeding. I cannot get her up.
Okay, you said she's fallen. She's bleeding from the head?
Yes.
Okay. How old is she?
I'm not sure, like 58 maybe.
Do you know if she fell from standing or not?
No.
Where'd she fall from?
She fell going up the steps, up the brick steps.
Okay, so she outside or inside?
Outside.
Conscious?
No, not really.
Is she awake at all?
Yes.
Okay. What happened?
She just fell back down. Can I get off this phone so I can go down there?
Can I have your name and phone number? Or are you able to bring the phone down by her?
What?
Are you on a cell phone where you can walk down there and talk?
I'm on a cell phone. No.
Okay, can you bring it with you so we can ask her some questions about what kind of pain she's having?
Look, nobody knows how they're going to react in the face of trauma or a shocking situation. So I'm going to give Maggie the benefit of the doubt here. But it is hard to ignore just how calm and unaffected she sounds on the call. Now, it's believed that the 57-year-old fell over the family dogs and ended up toppling down the stairs, ultimately hitting her head. At some point in this conversation, Paul Murdoch takes the phone from his mom and talks to 911. And he definitely sounds a lot more upset.
She's cracked her head and there's blood on the concrete and she's bleeding out of her left ear.
Okay, she's bleeding out of her ear.
And out of her head. She's cracked her skull.
Okay. Okay, do you guys know who she is?
Yeah, she works for us.
Okay, do you know if she's ever had a stroke or anything before?
Man, can you stop asking her these questions?
I already have them on the way. Me asking questions does not slow them down in any way. These are relevant questions that I have to ask for the ambulance.
Gloria Satterfield.
You said Satterfield?
Ma'am?
You said Satterfield?
Satterfield.
Satterfield, okay.
Emergency services arrive and take Gloria to the hospital where she later dies from her injuries in a few weeks. A Netflix documentary about the family, Murdoch Murders, A Southern Scandal, insinuates that Gloria may have been pushed down those stairs by Maggie or Paul. Paul, who had a boatload of other problems, no pun intended, including issues with alcohol abuse and anger, really adored Gloria Satterfield, according to friends. It does to me just seem a little far-fetched to think that he would be the one to push her. But Morgan, a family friend of Paul's, told Netflix producers that Gloria had found Alex's drug stash and, quote, knew too much. But there is currently no evidence out there to support the allegation that Maggie or Paul had something to do with Gloria's death. And of course, they're both dead, so we can't ask them. That being said, Gloria's son Tony wants his mother's body exhumed to look for any signs of foul play. He told Chris Cuomo that he really doesn't think there is, but just wants that reassurance. And truth be told, the Satterfield family really has no reason to believe anything the Murdochs have to say, and here is why. After Gloria died, Alec reportedly went to them and told them to sue him. I know that sounds a little nuts, but like I said, Gloria was a beloved staff member for 20 years, and through a lawsuit against the Murdochs, insurance would likely pay out for her accidental death since it happened on their property, and therefore the Satterfield family would be compensated financially for her tragic passing. It sounds nice, right? Wrong. Always wrong with the Murdochs. During Alec's trial, we learned that he actually collected more than $4 million through his insurance over Gloria's death, and not a single penny of that went to her family. The Satterfields later sued Alec, and he then apologized and agreed to give them the money. As for Gloria, though, last year her case was reopened by the police and they began the process of exhuming her body, but as of March, it hasn't happened. Alex Murdaugh, however, is facing fraud charges over that stolen $4 million in insurance money, which he admitted to doing on the stand during his murder trial. The Satterfield's lawyer believes that Alec will be back in court to face the music on these charges in the coming months. There are still so many questions around the deaths of Satterfield and Smith, but answers may be on the way sooner than later, so make sure you are checking dailymail.com for the latest.